Oh, Sakasakabo, this is Roxana from Metamorphosis Rocks, and today we have a spoken essay. Enjoy! Today we are going to do things a little differently. Normally, I just give you a bunch of facts to make clear where my opinions are coming from. That is not what we're doing today. Yes, I will give you some facts, but this is mostly my feelings based on the behavior of certain groups of people who are doing the most to make some of us feel like we don't belong here, like we should just keep our mouths shut, but we're not. Let's start with some obvious information. I'm not black or white. Unlike many Latinos in the US, I was born on the island and became an adult on the island before moving to the US. I have often said that being a Latino born and raised in the States gives people a very different perspective from those of us who have been lucky enough to be born and raised surrounded by our ways of life, our customs, and our culture. That doesn't mean we're better or worse. It just means that the perspective is a little different. Today we are here to discuss the very interesting phenomenon of the white savior. There are two parts to this particular spoken essay. During the first part, I will state my case. On the second part, I will be mentioning some resources that are often overlooked for reasons that will be discussed in part 1. Or maybe not. Let me be clear on one thing. This is not a political video. In fact, both main political parties in the US will be mentioned and not favorably. And although the issue of women's rights and rights in general is a political issue, to me it's more than that, because it is something I believe should be given to all of us, just based on human decency. Since politicians like to play football with set rights, I guess this conversation might become political. I fear that this will take away from the main issue, which is the ability to be good to everyone. Let's take it from the top, shall we? Let's get politics out of the way. Most people find the right infuriating. With the reversal of Roe v. Wade, their attack to democracy on January 6th, their support of organizations like the Proud Boys, and the reality is that unfortunately for Republicans, they have embraced some very problematic fringes of society, and by embracing them, have basically taken their traits. It's hard to believe that they're not racist when they think it's okay to discriminate against people. It's hard to believe that they're not anti-Semitic when they allow laws that will permit businesses to discriminate against Jewish people. And the big two. It's hard to believe that you care about all people when you applaud the elimination of the protections of Roe v. Wade, or when you think it's okay for the states to interfere in the transition process. Those last two have medical components, and you would think that HIPAA law would apply, but yet, here we are. Having said that, the other side has issues of their own. The most popular at the moment seems to be this idea that progressives think that they are the base of the Democratic Party, when we all know that black women vote at a rate of 90% Democrat, and many people of color tend to side with Democrats on elections. I find it particularly funny when I seem to remember one Susan Sarandon saying that she would not vote for Hillary, and I quote, just because she's a woman, end quote. And I also remember how many Bernie supporters preferred to vote for Trump than support the Democratic Party on election night. And well, we all know how that turned out. That is something that they do very often. I mean, look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez track record, and you will see a person who is doing the bidding for Bernie. And yes, minorities will fall for this trap time and time again, when they will be used by the respective political parties to cater to their white masters and then be discarded when they're no longer useful. But there is a more insidious, problematic turn of events for those who stand white saviors, and it's represented by several women. From the 50s and 60s Margaret Sanger, all the way to the present celebrity voices, Amber Heard, J.K. Rowling, and Margaret Atwood. All of them white, all of them very much anti-anything that does not either conform to their norms or caters to their white fragility. So let's take them one at a time. In the case of Amber Heard, I'm not focusing on the trial. I already covered that in another video. What I want to bring your attention to is Ms. Heard and her followers who have decided to crown themselves the voice of the hurt, to the point where they have decided that if you don't agree with them, you don't know what it's like to be a survivor of domestic violence or sexual improprieties. And because I don't want to spend too much time with her, I will summarize the following way. Nobody can tell you how to react, behave, or survive a traumatic experience. And anyone who tells you that your blind loyalty to someone based on an alleged shared experience is manipulative, and you should stay the hell away from them. It's okay if you don't cry or don't leave your partner. If you decide to work things out, it's on you and your partner. If your situation is not life or death and you decide to give it another chance, it is your decision. If your friend went through a similar experience and cut contact with all friends and family of the partner, that is okay too. It is okay to share common experiences and give advice to others when they ask for it. What is not okay is to expect that the advice will be obeyed. You do what works for you. Now let's go back in time and tackle Margaret Sanger as quickly as possible because I really hate this woman. I will make this short and to the point. The woman went to Puerto Rico and proceeded to sterilize thousands of women without their consent for the, quote, better good of women, end quote. For reference, I will leave the link to Bailey Sarian's video below, because this one, as many of you know, cuts too close to home and I really don't want to talk about it. Let me just say that she has been linked to racism and eugenics, and although she founded Planned Parenthood, even that should be cause for alarm. Why, you may ask? Because in the process of making birth planning options safer and available for white women, she tried to sterilize entire populations of women of color under the disguise of providing family planning to them. Let's talk about J.K. Rowling. Before you think that I hate the woman, I would like to point out that when my daughter was 7, I started buying the Harry Potter books after watching an interview with Rowling and watching mother after mother talk about how they had gotten their kids reading thanks to those books. It did work in my family. By the time we got to the 4th book, we would go to the bookstore at midnight and my daughter would read the book first, usually overnight, then hand it to me, who would read it in the next day, and then give it to hubby, who would take a week. We saw every single movie on premiere night. My dog was named using a play on words. Black Eye Moody was a clear reference to one of the characters in the books. It has been very hard to accept that the same woman who came up with this amazing inclusive universe could be a transphobe. But here we are. It's funny. The one thing I could never make peace with was the fact that Dumbledore, the venerable, lovable headmaster, was just using Harry to end Voldemort, making you wonder who the real bad guy was at times. How was I supposed to imagine that she was Dumbledore, showing her true colors after she had won over the affections of the public? For J.K. Rowling, suspicion started when she decided to use the name of Robert Galbraith as her pen name to try and publish under a different name and separate those books from the Harry Potter series. You see, Robert Galbraith Heath was a psychologist in the U.S. who experimented with electroshock therapy to try to cure schizophrenia and as a method of gay conversion therapy. I'm not going to go back to all the dreadful things she has said about transgender females, claiming that trans women are just sick individuals who pretend to be women to get close to young and vulnerable girls. In fact, very recently, she posted this tweet about a man who claimed to be a trans ally and was arrested for improper conduct. The funny thing is that she doesn't see the possibility that this man's allyship was a ruse to get closer to a vulnerable population. More about this particular tweet later. A few months ago, I watched a documentary about Jimmy Savile, a prominent figure in Great Britain, a celebrity who did a lot of charity work, and after his death it became known that the man was seriously disturbed. In fact, this cisgender straight male used his charity work to find and eventually abuse many young and vulnerable females. Like hubby likes to say, if men want to dress like women to go and hurt young girls, what is stopping them from doing it now? They don't have to go through all the process of transition to do it. More importantly, people like Jimmy Savile just create trust in their peer group and then get access to the vulnerable they want to use. Anyhow, while I was talking about it, I showed you the tweets I wrote as I watched the documentary. I also showed you my search online for any comments from J.K. Rowling about Jimmy Savile on Twitter. I then decided to just Google search if she had said something. The only thing I could find was some troll who compared her donations to Ukraine to Savile's charity work. Oh yeah, and on July 11th, she had a 5-tweet thread referring to abuses of vulnerable populations, and not once did she mention Jimmy Savile, who had access to those same facilities, which is where he found most of his victims. But her agenda is not to blame people when they do something wrong. It's about claiming that inclusivity is the issue, that trans people are the issue. Let me read what she wrote about this. I will proceed to read two different tweets. One is a standalone tweet, and the other one is the tweet thread I mentioned. So the first one is, and for those too naive to realize that predators will always swarm into movements trying to eradicate, safeguard, and boundaries, invariably trumpeting the virtue and screaming, "You're all just scaremongering," as they come. And she makes reference to an article by womenarehuman.com where this gentleman that's on the picture went and was arrested for misconduct with minors. Now, let me be very clear that according to the article, this man pretended to be a trans ally and whatnot, and that's what she's using as her quote-unquote evidence. Then comes this tweet thread. I cannot overstate my contempt for those supporting policies that endanger extremely vulnerable girls. This is a travesty. Have we learned nothing from successive abuse scandals? Do we value the disabled so little? And she's commenting on transgendertrend.com. Helen, a severely learning disabled girl, sex-based rights under threat. Next comes the next part of that tweet thread. Nearly 20 years ago, I founded Atwood to reform care systems for vulnerable children. I know from long experience how vulnerable children are in institutions. The statistics on predation are appalling. Disabled women and children are many times more likely to be abused. Predators go where there is access. Predators love victims who can't fight back or speak out. Successive studies show that 98 to 99% of sexual abusers are male. This validation of male feelings over disabled girls' protection is abhorrent. I'm so bloody angry my hands are shaking. I'm the daughter of a disabled mother and I've campaigned for the rights of vulnerable children for many years, but I'm still constantly shocked by the cruelty and indifference shown to those who cannot advocate for themselves. I urge everyone who feels the same way I do on reading this article to contact their MP, as I will certainly be contacting mine and anyone else I know who can stand up to this horror show. At Baroness Nickel, at Shaista Goer. I hope I said that name right. Now, notice that in that entire thread, not once did she mention the case of Jimmy Savile, who, because of his celebrity, was able to get access to young women in mental health institutions as well as hospitals. And that was one of the main sources of the people he decided to abuse. But you see, the thing about it is that mentioning cases like Jimmy Savile's doesn't go with her agenda of blaming transgender women for this. I am also not very sure about her percentage of male abusers, considering how many female abusers we have seen in recent history, but that's neither here nor there. This is editing me. I just wanted to take a moment to make one thing abundantly clear in case anybody misinterprets what I'm trying to say in the case of J.K. Rowling. I just want to make clear that I am not disputing that people are more vulnerable in certain situations, specifically hospitalizations. Most of you know that my mom passed away exactly 1 year ago from complications of Alzheimer's, and she spent the last few years in a facility. And that was my biggest fear, that because she couldn't say anything, somebody could have taken advantage of her. Now, lucky for me, the majority of the people in both facilities were female. But that doesn't mean there weren't any males taking care of the patients. In fact, The doctor that took care of my mom the last couple of years in the facility was a male. And I had no problem with him because I had no reason to suspect him of anything. Now, that doesn't mean that if anything would have happened, I wouldn't have raised my voice, because I would have. But here's the thing, and this is where I'm getting so upset with her, is this fascination or this obsession of hers that men will dress up as women or pretend to be transgender in order to facilitate their ability to commit the crime, when it has been proven in more than one occasion that men don't have to dress up as women to abuse vulnerable populations. And this is why I keep bringing Jimmy Savile, because this man got authorization from the state, from whoever the authorities were, to enter facilities. In one case, he was given keys. In another one, he was given rooms where he could participate, and he would also take patients out with permission from the facility. And she's not bringing that up because it doesn't suit her agenda. That's the point I'm trying to make. The last thing I'm going to mention about J.K. Rowling is yet another tweet thread where she is basically crying victimhood while simultaneously blaming men for being the problem, a common trope of white feminists. The thing about this modern feminists is that they no longer want equality. They want more benefits than men, making them in essence as bad as the men they fight against. I leave you with that because I want to talk about Margaret, so let me read this for you. Respectfully, I've been facing down the punch and kill TERFs brigade for a while now, and not once have I thought, what I really want is to hand this over to a man who thinks feminism is one of the worst things to happen to Western civilization. That is in response to Jason Whitlock, who asked her to consider speaking to Matt Walsh. I wouldn't talk to Matt Walsh, but that's another story for another day. She continues, like many women on the left, I despair that so many self-proclaimed liberals turn a blind eye to the naked misogyny of the gender identity movement and the threat it poses to the rights of women and girls. She's talking about transgender. Walsh's film undeniably exposed that many leftists are too scared to, but a shared belief that women exist as a biological class, and water's wet and the moon's not made of cheese, does not an ally make. I believe women are susceptible to certain harms and have specific needs, and that feminism is necessary to secure and protect our rights. Walsh believes feminism is rotten, and his default appears to be denigrating women with whom he disagrees. He's pot kettle. He's no more on my side than the shut up or we'll bomb you charmers who cloak their misogyny in a pretty pink and blue flag. And yes, she's talking about the transgender flag, because again, when she's attacking people, she's just bringing on facts. But when people are trying to educate her, oh, we are just horrible humans attacking her. And that, in a nutshell, is white feminism. Yes, people like J.K. Rowling and Amber Heard are here to save us from ourselves, because we need saving. Let's move on to Margaret, because I can't wait to do this one. For those of you who are not familiar, Margaret Atwood is a mediocre writer who has had a renaissance of sorts thanks to her most famous novel being adapted to a successful series, The Handmaid's Tale. Just like I was transparent with Rowling, I want to make it very clear that I tried several times to read this particular book. I was taking a women's studies class in college, and a young man talked so highly of this book. I just had to get it. I have no idea where the book is now, and if I find it while I pack to move, I will try to read it again. I have read many articles in favor and against this particular novel, but there are several things that stand out and have been obscured thanks to the inclusivity politics of Hollywood. By the way, that's a topic for another day. But they have this thing where if you make a movie, you have to have a certain amount of people of different ethnicities. And although in theory, and for me, if you're making a movie about anything, That's okay. There are certain instances where it's important to retain the values of the original material, and you'll see why in a second. In the book, there are only white people. The stories depicted by her own admission are from marginalized communities, especially black and indigenous women. According to the book, the white men have basically eliminated other races from their country. Men are all powerful, and women are just vessels to bring about more humans. Sounds familiar? When Roe v. Wade was brought down by the Supreme Court, a lot of people mentioned the book, the show, and there were even demonstrations where women wore what I call the red nun outfit of the handmaids. Personally, I found it infuriating because I was very well aware that this woman had monetized stories that were not hers to tell. There is a difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation, and in my opinion, this is the perfect example of the former. It is my understanding that she only admitted she, quote, borrowed, end quote, after being pressured and criticized. Anyhow, yesterday, this paragon of the women's lib movement decided to sit back home and drink some tea out of an interesting mug, and the caption reads, "In Nova Scotia with appropriately sloganed coffee mug." The mug reads, "I told you so." As someone appropriately pointed out, Ursula K. Le Guin, and I hope I'm saying that name right, said it best. Nobody who says "I told you so" has ever been or will ever be a hero. After some people commented, expanding on my knowledge of the situation, I had to agree. Now let's see what people said. I'm about to read you a very short thread that happened under her fabulous tweet, and yes, I'm being sarcastic. Where somebody said, "You've said openly, numerous times, that everything that happened in The Handmaid's Tale had happened in real life somewhere before. So how can you say you are the one who told us, and not the black, indigenous, queer, etc. woman whose suffering informed your writing?" And somebody decided to come at this person with, "You cannot seriously be mansplaining her entire writing and activism career, could you?" So here comes the savior, and this is not sarcastic, I mean honestly. She stole black and indigenous women's pain and trauma, whitewashed it, erased them from the story itself almost entirely. Then she decided not to say a damn thing when they cast a practicing Scientologist to play her protagonist. You remember them, right? 'Cause I do. They're the people who forcibly separate families, harass innocent people, cover for rapists like Danny Masterson, documented child sex abuse, labor, and oh yes, let's not forget working in the Sea Org meant forced abortions. Margaret never said boo about it, not once. She did, however, have plenty to say when her friend, a professor at a university, got caught sleeping with a student and was disciplined. What you're trying to play off as mansplaining is in fact calling a hypocrite on her crap. This person also made a direct comment at Margaret Atwood. "I guess it's hard to fit, quote, I took black women's suffering, whitewashed it, and called it a day before also defending my friend who slept with students," end quote, on a mug. At which point Margaret decided to answer, "What friends might those be? And with what part of women's history over the past 5,000 years are you unfamiliar?" Because, of course, accepting responsibility, yeah, that wouldn't be a thing. Now, on another comment, "But Octavia Butler told us so too, and better, and didn't sit smugly with a mug from the relative comfort of Nova Scotia." Yep, Octavia Butler never posed with a mug congratulating herself when some other country fell into dystopia. Eventually, because, after, 12, 13 hours of this, she decided to come back and comment, "My goodness, some of you are good at misreading. To be clear, when Handmaid's Tale came out in 1985, there was disbelief. I thought a religious right takeover was possible in the US, and was crazy Margaret. Premature, but unfortunately too close. That doesn't make me happy. But she had to bring it up. To be also clear, there are no overly LGBTQ plus people in Gilead society in The Handmaid's Tale, 1985, because the regime has killed and suppressed them, as has happened and is happening in many times and places. Because this isn't about, you know, the mistreatment of indigenous or black women. This is about Margaret Atwood being right. I can't. I honestly can't with people like this. But I digress. Let's go to part 2 because this one I'm going to have a lot of fun with. If you follow me on Twitter or TikTok, you know I did a much simpler version of this video where I only talked about Margaret Atwood. My favorite part of that video was finding writers from marginalized communities with stories that are more authentic and true to our experiences. I asked you to consider picking up a few of these and supporting marginalized voices. When I started working on this particular script, I wrote a little something about every single author on this section. Then I realized I did not want to influence you like that young man influenced me so many years ago. Mind you, I'm aware he wasn't trying to influence anyone. It's just I don't want to do it. I don't want to be guilty of the same thing. I encourage you to seek a couple of titles that pique your interest, research the authors, or just check out whatever intuitively calls your attention. I also want to let you know that I left out some obvious choices like Maya Angelou and her ever-famous I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. I wanted to focus on people that might not be as familiar to any of us. I am making one exception, and that is the first person on this group. He was not on the TikTok video, but this morning I saw him posting a beautiful tribute to his daughter who came out as transgender. Khaled Hosseini, I really hope I'm saying this name right. I always get it wrong, by the way. Is a writer whose book, The Kite Runner, both broke my heart and gave me hope for humanity. I would definitely pick up any of his books, and yes, he does represent marginalized communities as he came from Afghanistan to the US in 1980. While women like J.K. Rowling are obviously intimidated by trans women, a man is so accepting of his daughter, and it is a beautiful thing to see. And now, without any further ado, here are the authors.